8th grade. It is Miss Stonebraker here. Today we're going to take a break from compromises and violence in Congress to talk a little bit about 1848 and the women's rights movement and how it emerges. So if you could all go to your OneNote notebook, you're going to find your name, click on class notes, and you're going to be looking at Seneca Falls Convention, and we want to look at the introduction. So let's talk about what is happening in America at this time. So it's the year 1848. Slavery, of course, is still legal and is a huge part of the American economic system. And women currently have no legal rights. And it varied state to states. Some states were a little more progressive regarding like women being allowed to do things, while other states were a little more restrictive. But basically, in 1848, women had very few legal rights. And I'm not even talking like not even being allowed to vote. I mean, like, they would work a job, get paid, and they would have to give their money to their husband or their father. That's the kind of, lack of rights that we're talking here. So we'll see this emergence of women coming together to try to fight for, the women's rights movement in the sense of obtaining more legal rights and more privileges that women had been denied, since the Constitution. So the women's rights movement, the early stages of it actually emerged out of the abolition movement. So if you recall, the abolitionist movement was the movement to abolish slavery and free African American slaves in the United States. Now, many women participated in this abolitionist movement, but they started to notice that, slaves have no rights. Slaves aren't even considered people. They're like second-class citizens in the United States. They started noticing that women didn't have any legal rights. They were almost like second-class citizens, and they were like slaves to their husbands or their fathers. So in 1848, this group of women, band together with also including men, so there were men and women at the convention, to talk about, what is going on in the United States as far as what are women allowed to do and how are we going to fix this lack of rights. So there's a few people I want to point out. So Elizabeth Cady Stanton, you may have heard of her. She was good friends with Susan B. Anthony. She is one of the figureheads of the Seneca Falls Convention, as she wrote this document called the Declaration of Sentiments. The Declaration of Sentiments is basically, it's like loosely based off of the Declaration of Independence, but it lists all the several limitations of women, meaning, couldn't have any wages, couldn't own property, and basically how women are fed up with this and they want more legal rights. However, while, there was a large group of women present and men, this was very radical at the time. Like, women weren't even allowed to speak in public. There was a convention in Philadelphia where women were speaking publicly, and the people of the town were so angry about it, they burned the building to the ground because women spoke out publicly about slavery. So it's crazy. So this is a very radical idea of the time, that women would be joining together and demanding legal rights under our Constitution. So some things I want you to think about: how did the women's rights movement emerge? How did this meeting in Seneca Falls play a role in the overall women's rights movement? We're going to look at this probably in a couple of months when you'll talk about women's suffrage and, how did you get from 1848 to not having any legal rights to 1920 and having the ability to vote? And then how is the Declaration of Sentiments related to the Declaration of Independence? So below here is a newspaper article from 1848. Now, I was very kind and I typed it all out for you so you don't have to read that print. And I simplified it for all of you so you don't have to read all of this. But I do want you to read this. This was created at the time. It's called a primary source. It's back in August 3rd of 1848. And then I would like you all to watch this little video about the Seneca Falls Convention. It gives a great background for what we'll be doing tomorrow. And then lastly, there's a little forms just to see, what did you absorb from this? And let me know how you're doing. So if you have any issues, just please let us know on the chat. And I will see you all tomorrow.